G'day and welcome to Ryco Workshop Heroes, and today we're at Ryco headquarters to check out the R&D facility where all of the awesome products they make are developed. Ah, there he is. Hey mate, how you going? Oh, this looks interesting. What's going on here?
So we're 3D scanning an engine bay. This is part of the technology set we use to develop some of our 4x4 kits. As you're probably aware, fitting a catch can and a fuel water separator in a very full engine bay is very challenging, and so we try to make it as easy as we can for our customers by making a ready-to-fit bracket, hoses, fuel fittings, everything they need to get a couple of those crucial filters into the engine bay.
And I mean, I have fitted a few of these now myself, and yeah, there's no modifications there, it just goes in and yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, we don't like cutting, drilling and maiming vehicles. We just like our stuff to just slot straight in, line up with existing studs and weld nuts, and have molded hoses that'll connect to the PCV and connect the fuel system.
How much time goes into actually this process and getting this from that into like a CAD file?
So once the engineer's happy with the scan, the level of detail, has picked up everything they want in the scan software, they then can transport that into CAD. Effectively use this to then line up those studs and weld nuts and the things that they want to connect to. And then by having this in CAD, can effectively design the brackets, position the fuel water separator, do it all virtually in here. So then after which they can then, well, if they're happy with the packaging, then they can go about making some prototypes.
Yeah, cool. I mean, looks like you've still got a bit of work to do. So do you want to show me a little bit more about how you go from this to actually making a product?
Absolutely.
Cool. You lead the way.
Come inside.
Oh, here we go. This is the lab indeed.
Yeah, this is the dry lab. This is one of our XR kits. You fitted a couple of these. This kit, it has our crankcase filter, catch can. It has a fuel water separator pre-filter, and then all the componentry that you need to fit both of those into an already pretty packed engine bay. Critically, bracket, E-coated bracket, designed to line up, like I was saying, with the studs and weld nuts that are already in the engine bay, give a nice fit, and you know, we try to have as close to OE appearance as we can get. It's important for our customers to keep that OE look. Fuel hose, fuel fittings, we go for a quick connect. It's very similar to the OE fuel fittings. Crankcase fitting parts, hose connector, hose clamps.
One of the things I love is these hoses, how they're preformed as well, because you're not sort of trying to bend things and kink things. And
again, you're right, that's about having an OE look. By having them molded, they fall into place effectively.
And I mean, looking around here, you've got some pretty impressive gear in here. Can you give us a bit of rundown of what you do to get from that to this?
Once we get the scan data off the engine, put that into CAD. They'll design in the CAD software, they'll place the parts, design the brackets, design the hoses. Then we will start to make prototypes. So over here, we've got our 3D printer. The 3D printer, you can see it's printing a bracket right now, a prototype bracket. That's where we'll have a prototype part that we can then fit back into the engine bay, do that important physical fitment. And that's obviously to make sure that the bracket's lining up for the right mounting points that we want to line up to. It's also making sure that we've position the parts correctly, but then also we're making sure that you can physically get the bracket in and out. When we're making these brackets, that ease of fitment's really critical, because you can have a bracket that theoretically lines up with mounting points, but if it's too bulky to actually get it in, well then there's no point making it. So that's where the engineer gets to try fitting it themselves.
Yeah, and even like those Ranger engine bays, they are very tight in there, and having fitted one of your kits, you know, you have to angle it in there, but it gets in there nicely.
Once it's in, it fits well.
Nice. Well, what other cool stuff have you got to show me?
Oh, there's plenty. So here's our office, engineering section. So as you can see here, Mark, once the engineer gets the scan data into CAD, it can actually place these parts.
Oh yeah, cool.
Make sure that, you know, in this case, that Ranger bracket's going to line up with all of the holes, the studs that we've decided we're going to mount to, and then can also place those additional filters on the bracket and make sure that they're also going to line up, not foul with any of the OE parts. And then when satisfied with the packaging of the filters, can then also design the hoses and then ultimately make sure it has a nice OE look as well.
Yeah, definitely, and I mean, it does fit in there just perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah, they don't give us much space, but we usually find the space that we need. And look, and we can also do some finite element analysis. So when the engineer is happy with what we call the packaging, he can then apply forces and loads in here and actually look at, make sure that the bracket's meeting our stiffness targets.
Yep.
And durability targets. We can all do that virtually.
And I guess, I mean, this is in a Ford Ranger too, and a lot of them copper hiding as well. So got to be able to put up with what the owners are going to put us through, aren't they?
And we don't want to shake up our filters too much either. So we want to make sure they've got a nice stiff mounting base. They're kept steady. They're not going to vibrate and rattle and hit other parts of the engine bay.
So that's all good and well, but love to see what these filters actually do and how you develop them.
All right, let's head back into the lab and I'll show you how we develop a filter from scratch.
Cool.
Step through to the wet lab.
Nice. Wow, look at this machine.
So Mark, this is the wet lab. This is where we test oil and fuel filters. Yeah, as we've been talking about, we want to be able to fit fuel water separator pre-filters like our Ryco Z980 and catch cans. This particular machine here, and Steve's responsible for testing all of our wet filters in Ryco. He's currently testing a Z980 fuel filter. We very much recommend that all four-wheel drives, any diesel vehicle has 2 stages of fuel filtration. Most commercial vehicles will have 2 stages of fuel filtration, and we think passenger diesels should also have 2 stages of fuel filtration with a very good water separator. Especially now with, we've had a lot of rain lately, diesel fuel quality at servos may be of concern.
I guess humidity and stuff like that helps as well.
High humidity areas, prolonged humidity, diesel absorbs water out of the air. And so anywhere where you're not confident about the fuel quality, anywhere where you like to actually use your 4x4 and take it off the beaten track, you probably want to have the peace of mind. You've got a very good fuel water separator that'll stop any of that water that might get into your fuel tank. It'll stop it getting through to the factory filter and then your injection system.
I guess this is all sort of just sitting here at the moment, but what goes on when it's running?
So during this test, we're testing to an ISO standard here. This fuel filter is receiving a dosed injection of contaminated fluid. The way this rig works, it runs to an ISO schedule. What the machine's doing other than injecting dirty fluid is it's actually counting the size and the quantity of particles in the fluid. And it's doing that on the upstream and on the downstream of the filter. We don't want to just see the weight of the contaminant, that gets caught by the filter. What we're interested in is the particle size. So when this is running, what we can see is how many of each particle size, so everything from 4 through to 50 micron size particles. We see what's going into the filter and we see how many of those particles got through and what size of particles. Because whether we're talking about an oil filter or a fuel filter, a common rail diesel filter, the size of the particles really matter. But we can do all that in this rig. We can mount filters, multiple filters in series, or we can just test singular filters. We can also test everything up to including very large heavy duty oil filters, very small fuel filters, whatever we want to test, we can do it in here.
Well, looks like Steve's got a bit of stuff to do, so we'll get out of his hair and we'll move on.
Okay.
So what's in this one?
All right, so in here, this is the other piece to that 4x4 accessory filtration. In this special room, this is where we test crankcase filters, so catch cans.
Yep.
We're one of the few development centres who's able to test catch can efficiency. Yep. So this rig will actually inject oil aerosol. This simulates an engine crankcase, and it'll emit between 0.2 and 2 micron droplets of oil as a vapour into the catch can, and then we're able to see what proportion of that oil is able to get through the catch can, how much the catch can captures. And that gives us a really good sense of its efficiency, overall efficiency.
And I guess, some people may have seen the video we did where we actually took the entire inlet manifold off a Ranger, which was not a very high mileage car, and it was absolutely caked. It was amazing what gets in there and ends up staying in there. All right, what's next?
All right,
so over there we've just seen some fuel filtration testing and stuff like that, but obviously testing oil filters as well, and there's this range of Ryco filters. What's the difference and what suits what?
So for most people, a typical Ryco red box will meet or exceed the OEM filter.
Yep.
And I heartily recommend to anyone that this is a very safe bet for their vehicle, that maybe they don't necessarily want to go to a dealership anymore, they'd like to use an independent workshop. Yep. This will absolutely match OE performance. However, you maybe have a vehicle that you'd like to extend the life of, or a vehicle that might maybe have some exceptional usage, that's where we offer an upgrade oil filter, Syntec, and that's where we have a full synthetic media. You'll notice a typical oil filter has this is a cellulose media. That's a more traditional oil media. Absolutely fine in matching OEM performance.
Okay.
But for anything beyond OEM, we actually offer a synthetic media. Now this media not only filters at an absolute level down to around 20 micron, it's still about 50% efficient at 5 micron. And those particles absolutely wear engines. You know, if I could, I would create a 1 micron oil filter, but in the meantime, I will offer the best filtration technology that currently exists in the world, and that's currently this synthetic oil media. The other party trick about this media is it is also very high flowing. So on our premium Syntex now, we utilise this high efficiency media, but we also encourage even more flow by using big intake ports. Yep. We position the element a little bit further back in the can on the Syntec elements, so we open up a bit of a plenum behind the base plate, and we change the ADV profile to again maximise flow. So on these Syntec filters, like I said, Ryco Redbox for the Meet OE, but this is the absolutely Exceed OE offering, higher efficiency, higher flow and higher strength. That base plate with the larger intake ports, it's also thicker than a standard oil filter. Okay. So we designed these to withstand all the Syntec filters to withstand that 3,000 to 4,000 kPa burst pressure, where a typical OE replacement filter is around that 2,000 kPa. We pitch these not just as an OE upgrade, but also good for racing and performance. Yep. In fact, you know, the Z160 ST is currently doing fantastic service on a lot of the current 5 litre V8 supercars. Okay. Many of the supercar field already use this filter because it, as well as being the highest flowing filter in its class, it's also the highest efficiency filter.
And I mean, even especially events like Bathurst too, where it's a huge race and there's so much demand on the oil system, as well as, you know, the car's being pushed to its limits lap after lap after lap, and Bathurst is all about getting the finish line as well. So
yep, we don't want any filters failing on Bathurst, and that's why we make them exceptionally strong. We don't want to be the thing that upsets anyone's Bathurst attack. So that was the wet lab.
Okay.
Now we're in the dry lab. This lab, per its name, is all about dry filters, so air filters. Air filters being, in my mind, probably the most important filter on the vehicle. This is the thing that actually stops contamination getting in the first place. Yep. Unfortunately, one of the most forgotten filters. A lot of people think that you can pull them out, bang them off, just blow out the dust and then put it back in and get another 20 or 30,000 Ks out of it. It's not the case. We spend a lot of time trying to get our air filters to be, in some respects, better than OE, because, you know, we find in Australia, especially, we're dry, we're dusty, we've got old geology, we have much more fine dust in the air than maybe a lot of other countries, and we take our vehicles and we use them in dusty areas, unlike a lot of other countries where vehicles are developed. So we've invested a lot of money into our dry lab. We've got one of the most cutting edge air filter rigs in the world now, but it allows us to develop air filters to a very high standard. In many respects, especially in 4x4, our filters, we design them to exceed the efficiency of the OEMs. And that's not just filtration efficiency, but also construction. You know, we make our filters more robust. Yep. We make sure they seal very well to the airbox, and then they don't deflect once they're fitted and they're starting to load up.
And I guess all this equipment here, this looks like you're sort of testing like almost like an air filter dyno, really, isn't it?
That's exactly what it is. This is a dyno for air filters. This rig allows us to achieve some pretty extraordinary flows, but it means that we can test everything from heavy duty truck filters. So at the moment we've got looks like a Kenworth truck filters currently on the rig. The amount of capacity this rig gives us, we can test very large air filters, we can do racing filters. Obviously we can do OE replacement 4x4 filters, whatever walks in the door, we can benchmark the OEM and then set out to meet or exceed it with our own product.
And I guess what are the sort of data you get out of this machine and what does it do?
So this machine, similar to what we do in the wet lab, it allows us to do gravimetric but also fractional efficiency. So this will run the standard ISO test, which is actually a gravimetric test. Yep. And that means that it will inject a known amount of dust into the filter, it'll load the filter up. We can see what quantity of dust is caught in the filter, and then we can see what quantity of dust got through the filter. Okay. And that gives us an overall efficiency. But given that large particles weigh a lot and small particles don't weigh much at all, that method of testing doesn't give you a lot of information about the size of the particles that are getting through, only that you're caught most of the mass. Yep. And that's the international standard. What we've done is added a particle counter to our rig, and what that allows us to do is we can see the size of the particles that are getting through an air filter. And that's critical because they're the particles our customers care about, is what's actually coming through the filter, not so much what the filter's catching. Level of data we get from our rig, which is beyond what the international standard is, It lets us get to very fine detail about the micron rating of the air filter, which is actually really crucial when we're talking about engine longevity. What size of particles are we actually putting into that engine? Because, as you know, dust that comes in through the air intake ends up all through the engine, ends up at the sump, at which point you're then relying on the oil filter as a backstop to try and clean it up after the fact, but it's already done damage on the way in. I mean, we test a lot of other aftermarket filters as well as OE, and look, they just don't perform. We're now developing, similar to the Syntec oil, we're now developing some high flow, high efficiency air filters, which will give people obviously that extended engine life that they're after.
I mean, that's pretty awesome, and seeing, all the junk that goes in the filter there and how you weigh it and everything like that. And we'll just notice there you've got a cabin filter there, and I mean, we've fitted a few of them in the servicing videos. Talk to me a bit about what a cabin filter is and why a car needs it.
Look, we think cabin air filters are really important in this day and age. This is another area where we think OEs drop the ball a little bit. A lot of their cabin filters don't fit that well and don't seal into the housings, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a filter in here in the first place.
Yep.
The importance of a cabin air filter, there's two things. One of them is making sure the occupants aren't exposed to all that airborne pollution that they're getting when they're driving along the road. It's also protecting them from pollens, maybe things that are going to aggravate allergies. Yep. These new N99 filters, we made them fine enough to also stop wood smoke if you're in a bushfire prone area, and also pick up human aerosols, that carry viruses. That's the first thing. The other thing that I think cabin airs are good for is just keeping your HVAC system clean. Yep. That big air conditioning condenser and that heater core, they effectively end up coated in dirt and dust over the years. Coupled with some moisture from the cold HVAC system, you end up growing mildew in there. And this ends up clogging it up, creating flow issues, and then maintenance. So it's just good from that perspective.
Well, I mean, the other thing is too, is people probably don't replace these as often as they need to. And I mean, obviously every car's in a different situation, but what's the sort of service life on one of these?
Look, we recommend that they're changed every year.
Okay.
And that's because they, over the course of a year, they are going to get a fair bit of dust and pollutant in there. These particular ones also have activated carbon in them. And by 12 months, they've reacted all the activated carbon, so all the fumes that you're getting off the road have now been absorbed. A lot of people do forget they're in the car, and so they often get very underserviced. But I would always suggest, 12 months, 15,000 kilometres. Typically, you change it when you change your oil filter.
Well, thanks for the tour, mate. That was really cool, and I mean, it's nice to see a bit of the behind the scenes of the products we've been working with. But anything other cool stuff in the pipeline?
Absolutely. And we'll cover it next time you visit.
All right, no worries. Leave you to it.
Thanks for coming, Mark.
Thanks for that, mate. See you later.
See you later.